Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and today I'm broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. For those joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Let us know where you are joining from and the equity work you do or aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. I encourage you to hit your share or invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends, your peeps to join our Remix EQ community today. And just a reminder, we broadcast live on YouTube and LinkedIn. We can now connect more broadly, growing our reach and building our community. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers us the opportunity to connect and build community with each other around the equity driven work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative and effective ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, or play. Throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make the world a more just place. We are early in season 5 of Remix EQ Live. Today's episode is a community reflection show. This format differs from our interview shows. It is where I show up without guests, but in community with you to hold space for us to reflect together. As social justice warriors, we understand that reflection is necessary for us to do this work effectively, but to also sustain ourselves as we do. Previous community reflection shows have focused on celebration of our passion and purpose that has led us to become social justice warriors. We've also focused on participation among communities and the different ways we can combine our superpowers, which are the perspectives and practices we apply when doing battle against injustice, and invitation, which offers examples on how to invite those who have yet to be heard to speak about their lived experiences and ask questions about the data they encounter in their pursuits for equitable outcomes. And our most recent community reflections episode was entitled Amplify, where together we explored how we can turn up the volume on the people and communities who participate in and contribute to our work to make the world a more just place. Today's community reflections episode is titled Ask. In this show, we'll hold space to reflect together on how we ask individuals in our communities to share about their experiences and expectations. And yes, ask is an acronym. Y'all know how I do. During the show, I will provide an overview of our topic and break down the ASK acronym. Along the way, I will share or remix examples from my work or the show, or from you if you share in the comments. I will also include a few prompts or questions that encourage us as a community to reflect on our approaches and our practices within the communities we serve. You are encouraged to consider these prompts and examples in depth during your personal journaling time or with your small circle of support, be it professional or personal. So let us begin this reflective conversation for change. So let us break down our ASK acronym, starting with A. A stands for anchor, to provide a firm basis or foundation. Often we engage individuals in a community conversation with the purpose of exchanging ideas with each other, building a shared understanding about what's happening, or reaching consensus about what should happen next. To achieve these goals, we need to anchor the conversation. That is, provide a firm foundation from which the conversation can begin. As facilitators, we do this to provide context, to create entry points, and to establish connection. And of course, this can be achieved in many ways. A very common strategy we see play out in our community meetings is that a facilitator will welcome participants, share why this meeting is happening, and why participants were invited. Then the facilitator will offer an overview of the topic that is to be discussed, or outline a set of actions that are planned or have happened already, or break down or make accessible a policy or policy related decisions that affect the people in the room. While participants may perceive or interpret the information differently, they did hear and see the same information, which not only gives them context, but provides them with a foundation for which to begin their discussions with each other. Another strategy is to engage participants in a shared learning experience. So I'll offer up a professional learning practice I often use before engaging K through 12 teachers and leaders in collaborative planning. I engage them in a model lesson that explicitly positions them as learners. It encourages them to consider another perspective, in this case, a student, and it exemplifies the instructional principles I wish for them to discuss and plan for, such as connecting to students' lives at home and in the community, building and using knowledge through hands on experiences and peer dialogue, and creating opportunities for reflection and revision of thinking. In a neighborhood setting, this learning experience could be a walk in someone else's shoes exercise where participants build knowledge about another person's experiences to foster empathy and consideration of perspectives other than their own. Or it could include visioning exercises that introduce a set of possibilities for what community transformation can look, sound, and feel like. These shared learning experiences create entry points for participants to engage in conversation with each other. For those who see these experiences as similar to their lives or practices, they can feel confident that others in the room have a point of reference when they add their ideas and experiences to the conversation. And for those who feel they have limited knowledge about a topic, they can draw upon or reference the shared learning experiences or explorations of possibilities as they engage in conversations with community members. A final strategy I wish to share is community mapping or asset mapping activities. This strategy is often part of efforts to remove, add, or change neighborhood spaces. Several years ago, I collaborated with Denise Grabowski of Symbiosity and Christina Gibson of the Coastal Health District to plan and facilitate community forums in the East Side and West Side neighborhoods of Savannah, Georgia, where I live. During the first rounds of community meetings, residents mapped existing and potential healthy places in their neighborhoods. This provided a foundation for them to articulate what their community wanted in order to improve opportunities for healthy eating and physical activity. As you can see, maps are information rich visuals that can provide context, identify physical barriers, use markers to denote the area of focus. Maps also offer entry points into conversations. Common conversation starts include, I live here. Oh, I go there all the time. And as the conversations continue, residents begin to map their experiences to the displayed locations. I drive my granddaughter to this park on my days off. This park near my house is nice, but I have to cross the street where cars enter and exit the highway. I feel less safe doing this. And yes, mapping becomes an anchor for community conversations, not just because of the connections residents make to the locations on the map. It is because residents begin to connect with each other about the locations displayed as they share their experiences in these places. When we ask community members to share their experiences and expectations with us, we need to provide an anchor activity that provides them with context, creates multiple entry points for them to join the conversation, and encourages them to connect with each other through dialogue. Now, I want to invite you to share in the comments your examples and reflections about how you anchor the community conversations you facilitate. How do you introduce the discussion topic or area of focus to community members? What do you tell or show them to provide context for the conversation, create entry points into the conversation, and establish connection with each other during the conversation? For those of you who are just joining us, this is a Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. Thank you for sharing and inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to interact with me and each other. So please post comments, ask questions as we continue our community reflections episode about asking individuals in our communities to share their experiences and expectations. You are part of this Remix EQ Live experience. To guide our community reflections, I created an acronym ASK. So far, we covered A for anchor, to provide a firm foundation for which community conversations can begin. I shared examples of presentation, learning, and mapping activities that provide context, create entry points, and establish connection for community participants. Now, let's move to S, which stands for structure, how a conversation is organized and facilitated. Of course, we can invite people to speak freely as they please. This is a strategy that may or work depending on the situation and has variable and unpredictable outcomes. For this show, I am referring to situations in which you need additional strategies to facilitate community conversations, such as you have a time limit. If it's an evening meeting, folks need to get their kids to bed. And if it's a midday meeting, they need to return to work. Another situation in which structure is important to consider is that you have a quick turnaround for making sense and presenting your learning from community conversations, or you want to foster the conditions for equitable participation in your community conversations. These are situations where structure can be a tool. Just as we talked about anchor activities providing context for community conversations, we can think of structure as providing clarity for how to participate in these community conversations. Often, participants decide to accept our invitation to speak up about community matters. It's not always that they come prepared with a complete, articulated set of talking points to dissuade officials or compel them into action. We know that there are people and organizations who do show up in this manner and are often the dominant parties in these conversations or meetings. There are many people who show up because they have something on their heart and they are looking for affirmation, or they know that something feels wrong and they're unsure about how to right that wrong. So their expression about what they feel or their ideas about what needs to change may become more apparent through conversations with others if space is created for them to speak and be heard. Structure can create this space. Roles can provide purpose. Questions can provide clarity about what information is desired. Guidance can provide processes to ensure equitable contributions from all participants. Let me provide a few examples. Roles. It's not a secret. I love participant roles, maybe even more than I love acronyms, and that's saying something. In a recent nonprofit strategic planning session and a parent listening session, I organized participants into small group discussions and encouraged them to embody one of the following roles: facilitator, who guides discussions by posing questions and ensuring every person has a chance to add their ideas, questions, examples, and counterpoints to the discussion. Data gatherer, who records key notes that reflect the group discussions and synthesis. Time manager, who supports the group to move through the discussion questions in a timely manner by monitoring time and group dynamics. And spokesperson, who shares aloud agreed upon key points or synthesis from small group discussions with the whole group, making sure to reflect the content, tone, and spirit of their group. These roles add structure to the discussion and provide participants with additional purpose throughout. Another way to bring structure to the discussion is with questions or talking points. I prefer questions because questions give participants something specific to respond to, which can provide comfort or clarification for many. Also, for each key talking point, you can scaffold or staircase or cascade questions for participants to consider that guides them from concrete to abstract, past or present to future, specific to general, or personal to community, all of which are common trajectories for how people think and learn. And my final note about questions is that it is important to make sure that your questions are accessible, meaning that they are in a language or languages participants can understand, and that they are visible on screen, on paper, within the group, and read aloud and repeated as needed. And my third way to add structure to community conversations is through guidance. We have all noticed when someone in our group has yet to speak or contribute to the conversation. Maybe we continue on in the conversation, chalking it up to they'll speak when they have something to say. Or maybe we don't have the courage yet to invite them into the conversation. Or maybe we and our fellow participants just need a little support in doing so. Guidance can be embedded in the roles of facilitator or timekeeper, who are instructed to pay attention to group dynamics and contributions. You can also embed guidance into the discussion processes. For example, I often remind group members to take time to review questions first and reflect or jot down ideas you wish to share with group members. This is helpful and creates space for those who need more time deciding what they want to say. And finally, welcoming everyone's ideas and experiences into community conversations can take the form of norms or agreements for participation. Ideally, you want participants to co-construct a set of norms or agreements with each other. This is especially important if they will work together over a period of time. Sometimes that just isn't possible due to time limitations, or community members need examples to jumpstart their thinking. So here are my go-to starter norms. They begin: you are invited to share your ideas, experiences, examples, questions, and critiques in a thoughtful and respectful manner. Listen and learn from each other, valuing the unique knowledge and experiences we bring into this space. Encourage others to add their voice to today's conversations, creating space for them to share their knowledge and experiences. And create the conditions that support the best expression of yourself and your ideas. I always leave the invitation open for additional norms. Plus, it's good practice to make norms visible, audible, and amendable throughout your community conversation. Structure in the form of roles, questions, and guidance can create space for equitable community conversations where community members feel welcome and supported to share their experiences and expectations. Now, I want to invite you to share in the comments your examples and reflections about how you structure the community conversations you facilitate. How do you create space for community members to speak and be heard? And how do you embed purpose, opportunity, and support into their conversations with each other? All right, so as we move on to our last letter of the acronym ASK, I just want to remind you that we discussed A for anchor, to provide a firm foundation for which community conversations can begin. And I've shared examples of presentation, learning, and mapping activities that provide context, create entry points, and establish connection for community participants. S is for structure, to create space for equitable community conversations where participants feel welcome and supported to share their experiences and expectations. Examples of structure include roles, questions, and guidance, such as norms or community agreements. Now we'll discuss the final letter K, which stands for keep. This refers to how you capture community conversations. This recorded or documented information becomes a record of the conversation and evidence of your learning from the community. This evidence can be reported as is, summarized, or synthesized, depending on the goals of the project and the community. There are numerous ways to document a conversation. Notes. Someone other than the facilitator feverishly writes down key points shared during the community conversations, or hopefully types them. Participants who have embodied the role of a data gatherer might do this for their small group. This can be tedious, but it is an easy way to capture key information shared among community members, as long as the note taker or data gatherer is also a good listener. The other way we might document or capture conversations is by recordings. Conversations are digitally recorded and turned into transcripts for more careful review and analysis. This frees up the facilitation team to support participants' contributions to the conversation. Barring any digital disasters, community experiences and expectations are captured. And finally, artifacts. Participants can generate different artifacts during and following their conversations with each other. This can happen when the spokesperson from a small group discussion or breakout session reports key points to the whole group, and the facilitation team jots them down on chart paper or a nearby whiteboard. Or when residents mark locations or travel pathways on a neighborhood map, creating evidence of their experiences. During a past project, Childhood Obesity in Chatham County, which was sponsored by the Savannah Business Group, My Business Blue Knowledge convened parent focus groups where parents shared their experiences and preferences about pediatric healthcare, physical activity, and meals in schools. During these focus groups, I engage parents in an annotation activity to elicit their understanding of a report that gives details about their child's physical activity or performance. Instead of the usual respond to questions format, parents marked on the report information they understood or that they needed clarification for. They wrote down questions they had when making sense of the images and the text presented, and they noted suggestions for how to make the report more useful to them and their families. All the while, they were engaged in conversation and collective sense making with each other. This annotation activity served as an anchor activity that provided context, children's physical activity, that created multiple entry points into the conversation as they reviewed the enlarged report, and that encouraged parents to connect with each other as they made sense of the information presented. The structure of the activity created space for participants to contribute their ideas and suggestions in written, drawing, or verbal formats, which were facilitated by a set of sense making prompts. And participants' notes and markings, along with the recorded conversations, yielded artifacts, evidence of their understanding and expectations of school communications about their child's health. Notes, recordings, and artifacts are keepsakes from community conversations. They become your evidence as you craft the story of community members' experiences and expectations. Now, I want to invite you to share in the comments your examples and reflections about how you determine what to keep from the community conversations you facilitate. How do you capture what was spoken during community conversations? And are your notes, recordings, or artifacts sufficient to tell the story that honors the experiences and expectations communicated during community conversations? And how do you know? To close out today's Community Reflections episode, I am asking you to consider the acronym ASK as you reflect on your planning and facilitation of community conversations. Here is the full set of questions asked throughout the show. A for anchor. How do you introduce the discussion topic or area of focus to community members? And what do you tell or show them to provide context for the conversation, create entry points into the conversation, and establish connection with each other during the conversation? S for structure. How do you create space for community members to speak and be heard? How do you embed purpose, opportunity, and support into their conversations with each other? And K for keep. How do you capture what was spoken during community conversations? And are your notes, recordings, and artifacts sufficient to tell a story that honors the experiences and expectations communicated during community conversations? And how do you know? Of course, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments during and after the show. You are also encouraged to consider these prompts and examples in depth during your personal journaling time or with your small circle of support. Thank you for tuning in to this Remix EQ Live Community Reflections episode. Our Remix EQ Live interview shows begin in 2 weeks. Each episode is an opportunity to listen and learn from equity-driven professionals. Remix EQ Live guests share information, experiences, and even testimony that builds our knowledge so we can ask and answer the questions, deepen our understanding, and inform and inspire change that makes the world a more just place. I invite you to tune in every second and fourth Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube. Next, we'll be handing the mic to Pastor Yolanda Roberson of Kingdom Life Christian Fellowship and the Healthy Savannah Faith and Health Coalition. and Reverend Guillermo Arboleda of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church and the Episcopal Diocese of Georgia. We will explore the relationship between religion, faith, equity, and justice through a discussion of interfaith partnerships and programming. So, watch your feed, check your inbox, and visit the Remix EQ Live webpage for episode announcements, recordings, and more information about our inspiring guests. In the meantime, I invite you to view my recent TEDx talk entitled Building Community to Make the World a More Just Place. My talk was inspired by the Remix EQ Live show and community. It offered me the opportunity to pause and reflect on the learning and inspiration I have been receiving from interviewing guests and interacting with you, our viewers, our social justice warriors. Please watch, react, leave comments, engage in dialogue with each other, and of course, share it with your personal and professional communities. Also, while you're on our webpage, please discover new ways to support the Remix EQ Live community, such as donation, which makes it possible for us to plan, promote, and produce each episode that you listen and learn from. And of course, you can purchase merch like our Amplify notebook or our Empower notebook, or some message tees, such as the one that I'm wearing today. And while you are on the show's webpage, be sure to visit the Blue Knowledge Store, which is retail therapy for social justice warriors, and also poke around a little bit to learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, which advances equity in schools and communities through collaborative research, inclusive evaluation, and equity-driven professional and community learning. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and the Blue Knowledge YouTube channel, as well as subscribe to our newsletter. And of course, I invite you to connect with me here in these digital streets. Thank you, Remix EQ community, for your engagement, your encouragement, and your rally, which is how we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live. See you next time.